Hey, autoimmune warriors, welcome to the Stronger Than Autoimmune podcast. I am so fired up for you to be here. If you're navigating life with an autoimmune condition, you're in the right place. I am your host, Des, and I am not just a podcaster. I am right here in the trenches with you as a fellow autoimmune warrior. We're diving into real, uplifting stories and some seriously smart expert tips and simple lifestyle tweaks that can make a difference in how we feel day to day. Now I've got to give a huge shout out to my amazing listeners. You're the heartbeat of this podcast, and I'm so grateful for you tuning in. If you're loving the vibes, here is how you can keep the love flowing. Drop a rating on Spotify, share a quick review on Apple, or pass this episode along to a warrior buddy who can use a boost of hope. Here are some patients that are killing it for our community. Workers with Autoimmune Ailments Alliance. These folks are fighting the good fight for students and workers like us with autoimmune conditions. Want to get involved or learn more? Swing by WAAA.org. They'll love to have you. Leap Cure. They're all about hooking up patients with cutting-edge clinical trials and putting our voices front and center. Check them out at leapcure.com. Adapt Naturals by Chris Kresser. They offer nutrient-packed supplements based on science. Snag 20% off your first order with my code DEZ, D-E-Z, at Adapt Naturals. From my heart to yours, I'm sending you nothing but love and good vibes. Let's dive in together. Today on the Stronger Than Autoimmune podcast, we are talking to Dr. Jason, a naturopathic doctor who's basically the Sherlock Holmes of complex illnesses. He made his mission to uncover what others miss: hidden infections, gut issues, and those mystery symptoms that just won't quit. He's spoken internationally, worked on Canada's first publicly funded Lyme clinic, and still finds time to help patients get their life back. If you ever ask, why am I not getting better? This episode is for you. Thank you, Jason.
Well, thank you for having me.
Let's just start from the beginning, because the reason you started this Lyme venture, I guess, is because you experienced Lyme disease yourself. Would you mind talking about that journey and how that happened?
It started with my wife. She actually got sick. It was almost 10 years ago now. And she is a naturopathic doctor as well. She runs our clinic. She runs our home. She raises our kids. She does way more than I ever do. High functioning, very intelligent woman. And then all of a sudden, she just started feeling really tired. And then her brain stopped working as well. And then there was points where we were kind of out socially with people and we came home and she would say to me, she said, I knew you guys were speaking English, but she's like, I couldn't understand what you were saying. And when she said that to me, the light bulb went off and I said, okay, something serious is going on here, right? Like either you're getting some crazy autoimmune Lou Gehrig's disease, MS, or something like that. We didn't learn about any of this stuff in school. That's the issue, right? Like we get this kind of MS is this, Parkinson's is this, arthritis is this, but all it is a description of symptoms. It doesn't actually ever tell us what the cause is. And when we dig deeper into a lot of these diseases, these autoimmune diseases, we see that there's a cause. I always tell people, when you get a scratch on your arm or a cut on your finger, does anyone ever go home and go, oh my God, I hope my finger heals. I hope it heals properly. Everybody goes, yeah, I know it'll heal. I just have to keep it clean and dry. But for some reason, when we have our body injured internally, we don't trust it. We say, I don't know if it's ever going to heal itself. And in fact, when the body is attacking itself or killing itself, what I often tell patients is the immune system's looking for something, right? It's not randomly attacking you. It's looking for something to fix. The problem is that your healthy cells are getting in the way of what it's trying to kill or absolve. So anyways, I sent off some blood work off to Germany, which happened to be one of the main infectious disease labs in the world. It comes back positive for 5 infections: Lyme disease, Bartonella, Anaplasma, and then 2 reactivated Epstein-Barr virus and Coxsackie virus. How in the world could all 5 of those things happen all at once in one person from one silly tick bite? And the answer is it doesn't, right? The answer is when we look back on her health history and we say, okay, ever since we were dating when we were 19, she's always been a little more tired. She always had to go to bed sooner. There was always these symptoms of kind of like either mitochondrial dysfunction or something where the liver is not processing things properly. And now that we see, 5 infections, this is clearly an accumulation of infections that she has gathered over the years. If you talk to infectious disease doctors, they'll say it's impossible to be gathering infections like this. You get Epstein-Barr virus, you get mono, you get tired for maybe a month max, and then you get better, right? The truth is that there are published cases showing people having it for decades, where people are fatigued. And the issue that comes up is when your immune system's looking for viruses within your cells. Well, guess what? With Epstein-Barr virus, that often turns into things like, or has an association with Hashimoto's disease and thyroiditis. So instead of treating the thyroid, we should be treating the virus. As we started peeling back the layers, we realized that one, it was about how her immune system and genetics dealt with things. 2, what was her historical exposure to these infections and environmental stuff? Because when we dug even deeper, we found that she had very high levels of gliotoxin coming out in her urine, which is black mold toxin, which we know is one of the worst ones, right? So you start peeling back the layers and wonder their immune system is completely dysfunctional. No wonder their immune system is killing itself. That's how I came on this journey, because there was nobody around that really knew what to do. So I had to figure it out.
Well, it started with a love for your wife and wanting her to feel better. A few questions I'm thinking about is why Germany? Do none of the US labs give a good picture of what's going on with these infections in our bodies?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. There are some American labs that do better than others. I'm in Canada. And so we have a public healthcare system. People are used to not paying for healthcare here. So for that, to ask them to pay a few $1,000s out of their pocket for Lyme disease testing and for infectious disease testing is like pulling teeth quite often. So one of the primary things that I looked at was cost. At the time, the German lab, even with the conversion to the euro, was about half the price of what the American labs were charging. The other thing is there was a few unique things that they could test in Germany that the American labs weren't doing at the time. So one of them was with Lyme disease, there's 2 life cycles. There's the spirochete, where the bacteria looks like a corkscrew. It burrows into your tissues and it moves around your body. And then when your immune system starts to find it and attack it, that's when it kind of curls up into a little ball, and it's called a round body or a cyst. And so testing from the American labs at that time only tested for the spirochete form, not for the cyst or the round body form, where the German lab could actually test for antibodies to both life cycles. Plus, it covered more strains or species. Right now, there's over 20 known strains of Lyme disease or bacteria that cause Lyme disease. But at the time when Lyme was first discovered in Lyme County, all of the tests were based on the one strain out of the United States. But we know there's strains in Australia, Europe, Siberia, India, China, and people travel nowadays. I don't know a single person that hasn't gone on a plane and gone overseas. And second of all, too, with changing weather patterns, whatever the reason being, we know migratory birds are traveling further north than they ever did before. We're seeing a lot more birds up in Canada, in the north of Canada, that we've never seen before. And birds are the primary vector by which ticks are coming in. Most people think it's deer. They attach to a bird, they fly 3,000 miles, they drop down, land on a rabbit or a mouse. I was bitten by a tick not that long after my wife, and I sent the tick away for testing. And it had Rocky Mountain spotted fever in it, or rickettsia, which is another co-infection you see with Lyme disease patients. The Rocky Mountains, from where I live. Our idea of where these diseases occur has to change. We have to understand that just because something has shown up in Central America 20 years ago doesn't mean it couldn't be in Kentucky or in Wisconsin. It's just it hasn't been identified yet. Long story, that's the reason why I took the German lab.
Thank you for explaining that. I've never heard the bird theory, but that makes a lot more sense that things are just getting warmer in the world. But the fact that things are shifting, we need to shift how we think about what is really going on with our illnesses. So, would you say that all illnesses, especially people that have autoimmune disease, are rooted down to a hidden infection that's just not investigated properly?
Yeah, like other than genetic reasons for diseases, in my experience, there is always a root cause to the problem, right? The body doesn't decide to kill itself. Now, have we identified every possible cause? No, but we do know that these certain kind of hidden infections have a correlation, right? Like, for example, multiple sclerosis has I think when they did tests, 86% of them had chlamydia pneumonia. Now, chlamydia pneumonia isn't chlamydia like STD chlamydia. It is an upper respiratory infection, but it has a very similar it's a very similar bacteria to like syphilis or Lyme disease, where it has two life cycles, where it can burrow into the tissues and it can go into the cerebral spinal fluid and into the brain. Now, has it been 100% proven to be the cause of MS? No, but we do know that it's found in over 80% of MS patients. So, is there a correlation there? For sure. When we look at things like rheumatoid arthritis, we know there's some connections with leaky gut, and dysbiosis and microbiome issues, right? Because the gut is 60% of your immune system. Going back to the question, yeah, it could be toxicity, could be infection, could be leaky gut or food allergies, or it could be a lot of other things. But it's usually something that it shouldn't be in us, either living or something that we were exposed to that we shouldn't have been exposed to, that we're accumulating in our tissues.
We can dive deep into your knowledge of, I know you mentioned Hashimoto's earlier and how that is due to an infection or there's a linkage there. And I know that is one of the most common autoimmune diseases out there with women is Hashimoto's. But I really, really want to get into your specialty is Lyme disease. When people or patients say they feel a little bit better but never heal, what are the top reasons this is going on?
We could talk for an hour about that, but with patients, there's kind of two mentalities. There's usually kind of the people that come from more of a Western medical perspective, right? And they say, I'm going to do antibiotics. In the books, it says they work. And we know that this particular bug with Lyme disease, because of its two life cycles, it has a very uncanny ability to avoid the immune system because it burrows into tissues that doesn't have good circulatory patterns. So you think of things like the knee joint. Most people don't think about it, but the knee joint doesn't have blood in it. It has a sac of fluid that transmits oxygen and nutrients through compression and kind of through the filter of the knee joint itself. The bacteria will burrow into these tissues and they will survive in those tissues where the immune system can't find them. The cerebral spinal fluid and the brain is another one. That's kind of a separate entity or a sac within our body that's very, very hard to get our immune system to have a proper response in. That is one of the reasons why people don't get a proper Lyme diagnosis, because the testing, one, is it testing the right strain? Two, they get tested in a short enough period of time in which the test is actually accurate, because most people don't realize that if you don't get tested within about 3 to 4 months of the original bite, the test is going to show up negative 90% of the time. The other part of this, once it has gone chronic and into those tissues where the immune system has a hard time finding it, then the immune system won't show that when you do blood tests. A lot of doctors will test and say, well, your white blood cell count should be high. And that's the issue with Lyme, is the person knows they're sick, they feel sick, and their immune system, it doesn't detect it because it's in a body compartment that it can't see it in. So it's one of these infections that is incredibly tough to treat. Quite often gives people a false sense of hope when they start taking antibiotics. The bacteria will, some of them it'll die for sure. The antibiotics work if you can get it in contact with the antibiotics. But the ones that survive, they just go dormant. And then 2, 3, 4, 5 months later, when somebody gets run down, stressed out, gets in a car accident, their immune system gets suppressed slightly, and the bug goes, oh, wow, look, we can come out and play. We know you can cure Lyme. The issue is you have to stay at it. Just like if you've ever been to a doctor and you have a sinus infection or a tooth infection and they give you 14 days of amoxicillin and they say you got to take all 14 days, even though you're going to be feeling better after 2 or 3 days. And the same thing goes with Lyme. A lot of people either run out of money or run out of energy or run out of motivation. This is the frustrating thing about Lyme disease is quite, you have to treat it. You have to treat it for a long time, and you have to treat it even when you're feeling better. Otherwise, it's just going to come back.
So talk about that because I know you mentioned there's 2 cycles. So could you mention how long does it really take for a person to go through the full cycle of feeling well, like you mentioned, sinus infections, take the antibiotic for 14 days. How long is this healing process?
When we were back in school, and of course we didn't learn about this in school, but with autoimmune disease, we were taught for every year you've had it, it's 1 month of active full on therapy. Now, with Lyme disease, what I find is that the average, I would say, is about 7 months. Some people, it's a year and a half, 2 years. Some people, it's only 3 months. In fact, usually the younger you are, the healthier, the faster you will heal. I think that goes for anything, right? You sprain your ankle when you're 16, you're running on it the next day. So a part of it is age, but I would say the average is probably around 7 months of really one, eating the right things, taking the right herbs, doing the proper antibiotic treatments, maybe intravenous therapies, looking at gut health, and most importantly is your mental health and your emotional state that you're in as well. Because your body, like what I always tell patients is you can put a chicken in a cage and you could feed it the best food possible. You can put it on a beach somewhere where the weather's amazing. But if you sit there and poke it with a stick all day long, that chicken will die of a disease and die prematurely. That's the same idea. If you don't address the emotional stuff, if you don't address the stressors in your life, it doesn't matter if you do everything perfect, your immune system is still going to be impacted by that and you're less likely to be successful. And that's the one thing that most people ignore in their Lyme journey is they ignore the mental emotional because it's the hardest. I know I'm still trying to change and I'm working at it every day and I probably never will get perfect. But the point is I think people need to emphasize that that's just as important as antibiotics is they need to change how they approach life. They can't keep running around to every kid's sport. They can't sleep 6 hours a night and get up and do everything perfectly and expect to heal. Autoimmune disease happens predominantly in women. I think it's 75% is kind of the statistic in average. There is an estrogen connection. No doubt there is a hormonal kind of disposition towards that. But the personalities that tend to get the autoimmune diseases are those ones that always look after everybody but themselves. Be the perfect this, be the perfect that. And then eventually their body just says, that's too bad. You got to look after yourself. Right. And it's the wake up call time. But a lot of people don't wake up. They just want to take a pill and keep living their life. And those are the ones that don't get better. How do you stop work? How do you stop being a mom? How do you stop being, I'm not to say that dads don't get autoimmune disease as well, but that's predominantly what we're seeing. You know, I had a friend of a friend that just literally took 6 months off work, went on disability and said, you know what, we're going to cancel cable. We're going to cancel Netflix. We're going to get rid of all insurance on all of our cars. But we have to do this to heal. And it's super brave. Not everybody can do it, but a lot of people refuse to because they just don't want to admit that they have to slow down or they have to sacrifice. I think it's important to talk to patients, important to realize, and you have to be brave enough to heal. Otherwise, the body's just going to keep breaking down.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say that you can't, once you get autoimmune disease, you can't be the person you were before. You have to completely change yourself. You have to become a new person because that person that got you into autoimmune disease is not going to help you heal you.
Right.
And it sounds like
Yeah,
it's the same thing with Lyme disease. You definitely have to shift your whole life and how you see things, and that mind body connection is real.
it is. And it's the hardest thing to treat, right? Because everybody's got different pressures. You really need someone planting those seeds continually that these are very important things. These are not side note parts. These aren't 10% of your treatment plan. This is 50% or more of your treatment plan is you figuring out how to live differently and how to help those people around you learn to live differently with you. Because if all the people in your community and your family keep doing their life the way they're living and you want to do it differently, you're not going to be successful. So this is a whole ball of wax, right? And I am not skilled in that realm at all, but there are health professionals and life coaches that do help families transition into a more healing kind of environment.
Thank you for sharing that. And I want to talk about we talked about some co-infections, and it sounds like they all have to do with what has been on the actual tick itself. Can you
Hmm.
talk about something deeper that causes these Lyme diseases or autoimmune disease to be so challenging to get rid of?
The issue is a lot of the co-infections don't respond to typical antibiotics. A lot of the co-infections are not well understood. I mean, trench fever was something that the soldiers got in the trenches in World War I, and it was spread through the fleas on the rats, and that was Bartonella. This was a bacteria. So you can get Bartonella from sandflies walking on the beach in Mexico or Costa Rica. It doesn't have to be from a tick. A lot of people don't realize that they can get these infections from very innocuous little things. And next thing you know, you're starting to feel weird sensations on your arms, your muscles are twitching and doing all kinds of strange things. And then the doctor is saying, well, there's something neurological with you. There's no understanding of where these infections come from, what they do, and how they present clinically. I'm learning over my career, and my plan was to be a medical doctor. But when I started watching how she was practicing, I said, well, that just makes sense as a family doctor. She had a kid come in covered head to toe with eczema, and she basically tested the food allergies of the mom and changed the diet of the family, and the kid's skin cleared up. And mom and dad both lost weight. And I'm like, wow, you just changed that kid's self-esteem. You just changed those parents' quality of life. This is where family medicine used to be. The doctor used to know the families. The doctor used to know what they did for a living. They used to know what their kids do and what their kids are involved in. And you need to know all of that stuff to find the issues or the things that would be causing the disease or the dysfunction within the patient itself. You have to know all aspects of the patient, not just a 5-minute appointment saying, where does it hurt? So I think that's a big part of these chronic infections and autoimmune disease and hidden infections that we're seeing is just there isn't enough common sense saying that there is a reason. And two, we don't take the time to figure it out. We're just putting Band-Aids on everything. In the United States, in our public healthcare system, a doctor gets paid per patient, not based so much on time, but more about the appointment. So there's a motivation to kind of see the appointments be as short as possible so that your billing can be higher. And so it's one of those things where the system is kind of gearing it towards not being very good listeners. And listening is super important because that's where you'll find out what the actual cause of the disease is. So yeah, that's a long answer again to your question.
How do you know whether the root cause of an autoimmune disease is an infection versus an actual autoimmune disease? What tests need to be run, or how does a doctor figure it out, or how can a patient be their own advocate and try to move the needle on that?
We spend an hour and a half on the first appointment just talking to the person, finding out, what they did for a job as a teenager, what their parents did, where did they live? Were they drinking well water? Were they in the city? Like in my house, it's over 100 years old. It has lead pipes in it. It's just a matter of like really spending the time asking the questions and looking for where the smoking guns are. There's usually always a reason. When I say that, there are patterns that you see with infections. So let's talk about thyroid disease, for example. With thyroid disease, Epstein-Barr virus is commonly associated with that. So we would test for Epstein-Barr virus. Chronic gastritis, so heartburn, indigestion, digestive problems, is also associated with thyroid dysfunction as well. And then you have other things like heavy metals, so cadmium, lead, mercury, those ones can also disrupt a thyroid. So we would have a test for that. Mold toxins can be also what they call endocrine disruptors. So it interferes with the hormonal signaling within the body itself. So, if someone came in with thyroid disease, that's what I do. I do mold, I do heavy metals, and I would do certain select infectious diseases, of which mycoplasma pneumonia, chlamydia pneumonia, Epstein-Barr virus, those would be the top kind of 3 that I would look at. And then assess, their environmental exposures. Do they work in a garage? Are they a dentist? Are they a hairdresser? Are these people that have had exposure? Did they grow up driving in a car with parents that smoked cigarettes? That was my generation, right? The car was full of smoke all the time. And those things have lead and cadmium in them. And I'll tell you right now, like when I was a young man, I worked in agriculture, like in farming, and I handled what they call treated seed. It was a pink chemical that they would put on the canola seed, and we would just bag it up, and I'd be covered head to toe in orange powder or pink powder. 30 years ago, I was exposed. That was my last known exposure, and it's still coming out to me to this day. When I pee in a cup and I test it every year, it's still coming out 30 years later. So you can be exposed to stuff when you were a child, and the issue might be not coming out till now, because when you were young, you had hormones, youth, growth hormone, all those wonderful things, and no emotional baggage. And all of a sudden you hit 40, you go through a divorce, and your hormones start tanking, and your body says, I can't handle this weight of this burden anymore. What would you test? Once you see a doctor that does these kind of investigations, often we can see patterns. and we can usually hone it in. Unfortunately, it's not kind of a cookie cutter approach because autoimmune disease is very individual. I did a study on my daughter, not on her, but because of her. She had a very bad reaction to a vaccine. This was during the COVID lockdowns, and she was on the couch for 3 months, high level athlete, really good in school, lots of energy, super spunky. And then she was just flat out on the couch for 3 months, losing weight, no appetite. There was no solution to this kind of long COVID thing. We were trying all kinds of things, intravenous vitamin C therapies, some herbs, and that was working, but but very, very slow. And so I went away to a Lyme disease conference, and I ran into this gentleman that was sitting at a very lonely table. He said, I've heard of this product being used successfully for long COVID in India. It's an Indian herbal preparation, Ayurvedic medicine, which is something we don't have a lot of familiarity with in North America. He said they're having a lot of success with long COVID in India with this, and there's some published papers on it. But when I read the symptoms of long COVID, I realized that the symptom overlap was very similar to chronic Lyme disease. It was almost like an 85% overlap in symptoms. And I said, if people are feeling better on this herbal preparation for long COVID, I wonder what would happen for Lyme. If you're interested, would you be interested in if I supply all the product for free, would you do a study with your patients? And I said, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So we enrolled, I think me and there was 2 other doctors that got involved from the States. There was 86 patients in the study that we did, and it was a 2-week medicated trial. So very short period of time. You know, when you talk about Lyme disease being a 7-month on average treatment cycle, 2 weeks was a short period of time to see improvement. But what we did, let's sign up everybody, whether they're new to Lyme, whether they've had Lyme for 10 years. We enrolled people into it. And at the end, we had over 80% of the patients had statistically improvement, statistically significant improvement in their symptoms. There were some symptoms that weren't benefited. This is my latest project. It's called Guducci root. That's the name of the actual root itself. The specific combination that we used in the study was Guducci root, piperine, which is a black pepper extract, and homeopathic thimerosal. Now, thimerosal, it's a mercury version of mercury that they add to vaccines to stimulate the immune system. It's called an adjuvant. And it has a lot of bad press because you don't want to be injecting mercury into your children. But this is a homeopathic preparation of it, meaning that it doesn't actually exist in it. But as you know, in India, homeopathy has a strong footing in their medical system. And so this was a traditional combination of the black pepper Guducci and the homeopathic thimerosal. That's what we ended up doing this study on, and we had great results. I presented it at the ILADS, which is the big Lyme disease conference last year in San Antonio, Texas. Got very good response from the doctors. But I don't make any money from the company. I'm not affiliated in any way. I'm just interested in patient outcomes. But what I did find with my patients is those patients that were the most sensitive, meaning the ones that don't tolerate pharmaceutical medicines or even herbal or vitamin, tolerated it incredibly well. In fact, they seem to be the ones that responded the best to that medicine. What I was going to say is, because this is an autoimmune podcast, and likely a lot of the immune disease has an infectious underlying thing. If a patient doesn't have the money to get tested, if the patient doesn't have the money to get properly diagnosed, maybe this would be something they could try to see if it helps. And so I wanted to kind of throw that out there. But I just wanted people to have potential access to something that is easy to get. It's made in the States or shipped to the States, out of the States. And we had really good results with it. So the website is CelWel.com. So CelWel.com. So CelWel.com. And you can go there and read about it if you want. Yeah, don't, like I said, I'm not making any money off of it, so it doesn't matter to me. But
thank you.
I just found it to be a very useful tool for a lot of patients that had this kind of autoimmune tendency, and especially sensitive dispositions.
Yeah, there is quite a few people. They're very sensitive, like you said, and their outcome takes so much longer that what you were saying, it gets daunting and it's exhausting for a patient to go through that for double the amount of time that somebody else could.
Sure.
A resource like that is wonderful. Thank you. That shows your big heart. A few more questions
Thanks.
about chronic Lyme, I know you kind of mentioned your protocols and you even worked with your daughter doing glutathione IVs, vitamin C, hypothermia. And you could do all these different herbs and IVs, but what really helps, because the liver has to detox and the kidneys have to help get rid of all these toxins or the infection. How do you support your kidneys or liver to tolerate this type of heavy duty work that the body has to do?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, there's a few main ingredients that we lean on a lot. As we know, the liver has two phases of detoxification. The first phase is very B vitamin dependent, and the second phase is a little bit more related to more herbs that would be supportive of phase two. So glutathione is a big one that we'll use. Silymarin or milk thistle is another one that we use. There's some pomegranate extracts and then some other B vitamins and stuff. There's obviously companies and products that I use regularly, and N-acetylcysteine as well plays a role. Now, what's interesting is that people that will what a Herxheimer reaction is, but it's basically a worsening of symptoms. And a lot of times people will think that they're getting worse, but it can be what they call a die-off reaction. So if you're actually killing the bacteria, its little bodies are exploding inside of your bloodstream, and then your immune system gets really mad because it sees all these bits floating around and it gets a massive inflammatory reaction. So you can see this kind of overreaction by the immune system or Herxheimer reaction. If that lasts for only about 2 days, maybe 3 days, then that's okay. But if the symptoms get worse for over 3 days, then it's a sign that you're overtaxing your liver or your kidneys, or you're pushing way too hard. So that's a really important distinction. The other important thing is are they new symptoms? So if it's a worsening of old symptoms, that's a better sign. If it's a new symptom, that's not generally a good sign. That's usually an allergic reaction or something else that would be indicating that the medication isn't a good fit for you. Now, that's the same with antibiotics or herbs. If you don't Herx, it doesn't mean that it's not dying, because that's another question I get from patients all the time. That's not true. It just might mean that your body is particularly good at quenching the inflammation. Your body might be in a good state to detoxify. There's a lot of reasons why you could not Herx. Now, on the kidney side of things, a lot of the same ingredients that your liver uses for detox is very similar to help protect the kidneys as well. Two of the ingredients that I really like for that, again, silymarin or milk thistle is very good for the kidneys as well. Cordyceps, which is a mushroom extract, very, very protective against kidney damage as well. Everyone talks about this idea of acidification of the body. A more acidic body will have more inflammation in it. It's just kind of a chemical consequence of it. But the thing is as the body gets more acidic, the liver and kidney don't work as well. So there are ways that you can kind of test that and augment that. If obviously you start eating super hypoallergenic and greens juicing and doing all these wonderful things, you probably will see your urine become less acidic. And what you're looking for is a urine pH of about 6.6 or higher. Now you can go to any drugstore or on Amazon and you can
I
order
was just
urine
about to
or
ask that.
pH strips. Yeah, and you can just every morning when you wake up, pee on a strip and see if it's yellow, then it's acidic. If it's orange, it's less acidic. And once it turns green and then blue, it's becoming more neutral and then basic. But 6.6, like you want it higher than that level. If you get it higher than that level, then the liver and kidney work more effectively. And so I'll just give you a real life example of that. So for example, if your child was to break an old fashioned mercury thermometer and put the mercury in their mouth, if they were taken to the hospital, the doctors typically what they would do is hook up an IV and they would give them potassium in the IV. And the potassium, what it does is it actually alkalinizes the body so that the liver and kidney works better to clear the mercury out of the system. So this isn't like a new agey, hairy-fairy kind of way of dealing with detox. It's a well-established way to help the body detox. So if you're having these symptoms, that's an avenue you can explore, is that pH story or that pH angle of things if the herbs and stuff aren't working well enough. Potassium citrate's one of the ways that you can alkalinize the urine. There's a number of other ways you can do it. I mean, healthy living obviously usually does it, but I even have patients that eat perfectly, exercise perfectly, sleep perfectly, and they're still acidic. It's just who they are, their constitution of how they were born. So you have to physically give them some natural medications to try and alkalinize the body. But again, you can do that under supervision, or I'm sure there's a lot of information online how to do it safely, though. Just be careful with that.
Thank you for so many different ways to look at our health differently and give resources. Anything I haven't asked you that you believe is, I wouldn't say game changer. I hate saying game changer, but I know the tea that you mentioned is one resource, but anything that you think can help others going through this Lyme disease or autoimmune journey?
Yeah, like I get asked this question a lot because finances is a big issue. One thing that I think would be helpful and have the least amount of negative side effects would be doing the CelWel, which we talked about, that Guduchi root extract. Cat's claw and Japanese knotweed, which is the classic herbal combination. Andrographis, potentially you have to be careful with that one because can make some autoimmune diseases worse because it's an immune stimulant. But I mean, when you talk about herbs, those three herbs are ones that are traditionally been used for Lyme and generally do help a lot of people. The issue is they just don't take it for long enough. I think the protocol is supposed to be somewhere, again, around that kind of 8 or 9 months long in the case studies that have been done. For me personally, I always like to have evidence. If there was one thing, it would be to get tested and get tested properly. There's labs in the United States like IGeneX. It's a good Lyme disease lab. Armin Labs out of Germany is the one that I tend to use. I mean, part of the reason I use that one is it works out to be a bit cheaper, and there is a few extra tests that aren't available on the American lab. If we didn't do all of that testing, we might still be spinning our wheels. We may have lost the clinic and our home, and we may be divorced by now. Like, I hate to say that, but if her health didn't get better, the amount of stress that would have been, I always tell people, like, don't be cheap on testing. There's cheap ways to get better once you know what you're fighting, but don't be cheap on testing because you need to know what is actually the cause. What's the cause of the disease?
Yeah, I believe so. I went 10 years being misdiagnosed. Probably the reason why I probably wasn't getting tested correctly because why years later I have 4, 5 autoimmune diseases. So I really believe in advocating for yourself and getting tested correctly and not skipping on that, because the sooner you get tested for that, the better you can get the right treatment for it. It's just sad that because people believe their doctor and just keep on going on that same, like we talked about at the beginning, there's nothing wrong, let's just get nerve testing for this, and they're not looking at the root cause of what's really going on behind the scenes.
I was going to say IGeneX is easy to find. That's IGENEX.com, but that's the American lab. For Americans wanting to do the German or European testing, I find that the European one is more likely to cover that just because a lot of people travel nowadays. And if you want to look into getting tested through the German lab, is ALIANZA biohealth, biohealth.com. So that's ALIANZ biohealth.com. And that one has the test kits that they can send out to your doctor, and then your doctor can do the blood draw and send those off, usually through FedEx or UPS or DHL, whichever's a better provider in your state.
Thank you. Well,
Mhm.
I appreciate your time. Anything, how can people find you? How can people work with you?
Legally, the rules are just ridiculous. I mean, I could consult with people and give them guidance from a distance, but I can't give them treatments from a distance, i.e., prescriptions over state lines or whatever. So, what I would say is if you want more information on chronic disease, hidden infections, autoimmune disease, I do have a TikTok and Instagram account. It's at Lyme Doctor for both of those. There's a lot of good information there. I do have a website, just lymedoc, lymedoc.net. It's not a website that I spend a lot of time on, but it does have some information on there as well if you want to get in contact with me.
Thank you. All right. Well, I appreciate your time.
Okay.